In today's episode, we're going to be featuring Luke Northweather. You know, when we look at the spring portal season, Javon Porter isn't the only homecoming of sorts that happened this spring. Luke Northweather, a former Blair Oaks Falcon, is returning to the area. And the reason kind of came with an understanding. I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but Mizzou Hoops, along with all college hoops rosters, are now limited to 15 players. That includes walk-ons. There is no longer a long bench of up to 20 players. All three of Mizzou's walk-ons from last year have moved on, and in steps Luke Northweather. He isn't necessarily a walk-on in the traditional sense. He has Division I experience. He played 2 seasons at Oklahoma before. He did have one redshirt year to start off, so he's now a 4th-year player. But Luke is coming over to Mizzou with kind of a mutual understanding of sorts. That is, nothing's guaranteed. He's going to get an opportunity to play, but it doesn't come with the same sort of expectations as a normal transfer would that is going to be coming here with playing time more or less guaranteed. And when you look at a player with high major Division I experience, and it's not light, that is a pretty cool thing, I think. I think most understand, between Luke and Mizzou, I should say, that most understand that this is not going to be a guaranteed situation in the traditional sense. But, when we talk about walk-ons, this isn't really traditional in that sense. I think there might be a little something more here. As we mentioned, he is now a redshirt junior. Luke is a center, although he's a little bit different type of a center as you would compare Sean Phillips or even a Javon Porter. He's listed on Mizzou's roster as being 6'11" and 235 pounds. He's from the Jefferson City area originally. For those not from mid-Missouri, Blair Oaks is a school just outside of Jefferson City, and they have a pretty storied athletic program down there, not only in basketball, but football and many other sports. But as far as his background goes, he is a transfer from Oklahoma, spent 3 years there. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year in Missouri several years back and did have a little bit of interest from Dennis Gates and the Tigers at the time that he was graduating. Looking at his stats, he averaged just under 3 points a game last year at Oklahoma, just under 2 rebounds per game, and he played about 11, 12 minutes a game, which isn't bad. Again, when we're looking at it from the lens of a guy who's coming in as more than a walk-on, but perhaps a little bit less than a typical scholarship transfer guaranteed playing time type player. When we look at his advanced stats, trouble speaking there, he played about 25% of minutes for Oklahoma, which is about 10 minutes an outing. That was 10th highest on the roster. His usage rate, however, was very low. It was just above 10%, which was 11th highest. That is a severe role player. We're talking a guy who wasn't involved on the offense much. That being said, his offensive rating was 124.6, which was 2nd highest on the Sooners a year ago. Now, you have to take those two numbers in concert. Lower usages usually mean higher offensive ratings, but still, when you're playing at a Division I level in the SEC as good as it was, that's a pretty impressive number. That was buoyed by his 56.3% effective field goal percentage, which again gives bonus points, as you will, for 3-point shots. He had a 22.2% free throw rate, which was 10th highest on the team. He's not much of a guy who's going to be seeking out contact. And finally, his BPR, the Bayesian Performance Rating by Evan Maya, had him at 0.32, which was 11th highest on the team. That isn't a real impressive number. But again, when you're talking about a guy who's going to slot in more towards the bottom of the rotation, that's fine. When you get that experience and he can do a few things well, you add that to a roster that doesn't have a lot of answers at the front court, that's another option, albeit perhaps in a more limited sense. So when we talk about the role, honestly, I'm kind of digging this addition. You may say, well, he's at the bottom end of the rotation. Yes, but I don't think he's going to be starting games for Mizzou, and I don't think anyone's expecting that. But adding a skilled 6'11" big man who has played at this level before as insurance, yeah, I'm on board with that. I do think his overall playing time might be a casualty of who else is on the roster. You know, when you look at a guy like Mark Mitchell, he's going to be getting a lot of minutes at the 4. Trent Pierce started a lot of games for Mizzou last year. He's going to figure it in the front court. And then you have new additions with Javon Porter and Sean Phillips. And no matter what you consider Jacob Cruz, whether he's more of a wing or a front court player, he's going to be getting minutes. Then you have more of the unknowns with Trent Burns and Nick Randall. Trent Burns obviously is going to be having an issue with his foot to start the season, so his playing time may be a little bit up in the air. But even Nick Randall, he's going to be coming in as a scholarship freshman. He's going to be pushing for time. So, you know, when we look at the overall picture, where does that leave Luke Northweather? To me, he's probably towards the bottom of the rotation. However, there are some things to like about what he brings in those limited minutes that might increase his time a little bit. As it stands, I have him playing just under 5% of minutes, which is 13th highest on the team. A usage rate of a little bit higher, 14%. I think the way Mizzou plays will probably get him involved in the offense a little bit more. In his points per possession, I don't really know how to slot that just because I'm not quite sure where he's going to fit in, but points per possession points, I think those are going to be pretty low and limited. Again, slotting in towards 13th, 14th on the team. So with that preface out of the way, let's take a little bit of a look at what Luke can do on the floor, and we're going to look at his offensive strengths first. The thing I like about Luke more than anything else is I think he fits in well with this team. And what I mean by that is Mizzou's going to be a pretty heavy usage pick and roll team this year based on Sebastian Mack and Anthony Robinson being very proficient as ball handlers in those actions. But having a guy who can set screens and be part of the offense in tandem with them can really help them out. And something Luke has done real well so far in his career is pop out on ball screens. This requires, I'm going to pause it real quick. This requires the low man, the man guarding Luke Northweather, to cheat out on him. And we're going to see Amari Williams here for Kentucky. He's not going to do that. He's going to play Jeremiah Fears on the drive. As you see him camping out down low, Luke Northweather is wide open for 3. If you can have a guy who can knock down those shots, that will keep the defense honest and allow those ball handlers the ability to penetrate into the lane. Cover your eyes if you don't want to see this particular clip. But again, it's another good example of what we're talking about here. Sets the screen, pops out. He has the ability to knock down those shots. That can contribute to offensive flow when we're talking about the type of offense I think Mizzou's going to run. Again, setting a screen here, slipping it, popping out. Wide open for 3, knocks it down. That's simple offense. Those are the things that Luke Northweather can bring in small runs for a team like Mizzou. So much focus on the ball handler, leaves them wide open. Unlike Sean Phillips, who is going to be a hard rim roller out of these actions, who's going to look for lobs at the rim, Luke is not like that. His game is going to be effectively what you're seeing in these clips here. For his career, out of these actions, about 31% of his offense comes out of ball screens, and he has nearly a 1.2 points per possession, which is an excellent number. Simple stuff. All right, there's a rare rim roll by Luke Northweather. He does have that club in the bag, although it's not something that he does frequently. it is nice to see that he is capable. Here he is camping out in the dunker spot. He's been pretty good at moving off the ball as a cutter. I wouldn't say it's a big part of his game, but he's done enough of it to keep defenses honest. Here he is just flashing to the open spot. He is not big on taking the ball to the rim, but when he does get there, he has a very elite 1.54 points per shot, which is, again, elite. But it's such a small facet of his game that I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. But those are a few things that we saw there that Luke can do offensively. Now, when we go over and talk about some of his weaknesses as an offensive player, he isn't your typical floor spacer. And what I mean by that is some guy who's going to go camp out behind the three-point line without being involved in any other sort of action. We talked about the pick and pops. He's pretty good at that. But when you're just asking him to space out, hold a defender, he hasn't shown the ability to really be that good in that area. So if you're really wanting to get him on the court, I think you kind of have to get him involved in those ball screens, as we're seeing here. He doesn't have a bad-looking jump shot. He just hasn't been real effective with it so far in his career. He sees about 26% of all of his offense come out of spot-ups, which we're talking about. His points per possession is a mere .882, which is below average. And I think a big part of the reason for that is because he's pretty limited. When he gets outside, he can knock down the occasional shot, but he doesn't really have or hasn't shown the ability to drive closeouts. And what I mean by that is if a guy comes out on him, he doesn't have the ability to drive past him. He's going to be a stationary shooter, which leads to a lot of contested jump shots. And on the point of contested jump shots, which we're seeing here, he has just a .733 points per shot in his career on those attempts, which is not good. If Luke is shooting an open jump shot off the catch in a pick and pop, he's deadly. He's very effective. If he gets into more of spot-up actions or if he's looking at contested shots off the catch, he's just not been as good. And frankly, it's almost bad offense when he's taking those shots. We're going to see a little bit of his post-up game here. Again, not a big part of his game. He hasn't really shown the ability through 2 years to be much of a threat on the block. Isn't super physical there. Doesn't have a whole lot of moves. So, when we're talking about him playing, design plays for him on the block aren't going to be a big feature. And in fact, I think we're going to see all 4 of his post-up attempts last year in these clips here. It's just, again, not a big part of his game. Not something he's been asked to do. So now that we've seen his offense, let's talk a little bit about his defense. I think perhaps more than anything, his defense is probably what's going to limit his time. It's not super impressive. He's struggled one-on-one in the post. He's struggled defending players out on the perimeter. Here you see him matched up with Terrace Reed in last year's NCAA tournament. He's not bad at either of those things. It's just when you look at the level needed to guard at the SEC level, he's just a little bit behind. Amari Williams move him off his spot there. You know, it's both a combination of size and physicality that I think is holding him back. He's a big kid, but when we're talking about SEC post players, he's a little undersized, and doesn't have the elite length or leaping ability to really make himself a force in the interior. And here we're seeing him out on the perimeter, and this is against a very skilled 5-man, but still. The ability to stay in front of opponents, the ability to move your feet, go side to side. Being a switchable defender, not really his strength. Here is matched up with Mark Mitchell. This is a tough guard. Carson Edwards, very, very fast and shifty. He doesn't have much of a chance at keeping those guys in front. When you look at Mizzou's switching defense, I think it would be hard to envision Luke Northweather as being an adequate defender when switched on to guards. Farrell Payne doing a good job taking it right through his chest. Physical player, but still, you know, when we look at who Luke can guard, these are the things you got to look at. Can he guard the players in the interior? Can he guard them on the perimeter? A little bit of a tough answer for both. So that's what I have for you on the film. You know, I like the addition of Luke Northweather. You know, whether he's a walk-on, whether he's a scholarship player, whatever you want to call him, if you have the understanding that he's coming in for depth and to provide experience and provide a very defined skill set for a team that I think fits that skill set well, I think he's overall a pretty good addition. You know, how that works out remains to be seen, but having that depth and experience in the front court that lacks it, I think that's big. There aren't many answers in the front court. There's a lot of options. He is another one of those. And I think used correctly, he can really improve Mizzou's offense, even if it's just in short stints, because I don't know how much his defense is going to allow him to stay on the court for longer periods of time. So that's what I have for Luke Northweather. I hope you've been enjoying these player previews. We've got 14 of them in total, one for each player. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to Rock M Radio. If you like us, like what we're doing, like us, leave us a comment. If you don't, leave us a comment as well. You know, be a little nice about it, but let us know what we can do better. This is being hosted on Rock M Plus, our new site that's a sister site, if you will, to Rock M Nation. We've got a lot of good stuff over there: recruiting, player analysis, breakdowns, bracket projections, whatever you could possibly want as a basketball fan for Mizzou. You know, we've got it. So if you haven't already, give us a subscription over there. Come join us. We've got pretty talkative forums. You know, it's a good time. I enjoy hanging out over there. But I'm not going to keep any longer. Check out the rest of our player previews as they roll out, and let's get ready for the basketball season. It is almost here. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning into Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. Rock M Radio is the official podcast network of Rock M Plus, a new and exciting subscription service provided by me and the other voices of Rock M Radio. Please take a few moments to head over to rockm.plus and sign up for an account today. The cost is only $5 a month, and benefits include access to our live podcast, a subscriber-only message board, weekly newsletters, and more. If you enjoyed this episode of Rock M Radio and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, make sure to click the subscribe button below and tell your friends. Our podcast feed is available through the Apple Podcast app for iPhone, Google Podcast app for Android, whatever app you listen to your podcast. You can also find Rock M Radio on Spotify. If you're looking for a podcast about your favorite team that is not Missouri Tigers, Fan First Sports Network is your answer. A full podcast network loaded with the team-specific podcasts covering Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, and more. And we'll be back with more episodes of Rock M Radio coming to you soon.